All right, welcome back to the Darkest Theory podcast. I am Subtle alongside ScrapBrain SC2,
What up?
and we have another big update from Behavior regarding the changes from the PTB. We were kind of thinking that this wouldn't be another episode of updates, but Behavior has pumped out another update a week later, basically addressing pretty much all of the community's concerns from that update, which is pretty crazy. So the last episode and from the PTB, the big concern, right? The massive change was the change to heal speeds. We had the every heal was up from 16 charges or 16 seconds by default to 24, and they also addressed medkits by making those take longer as well, and there was less ways for you to stack charges to get as many uses, and did a pass on some of the add-ons and all that kind of stuff. But there was a big concern with how that trickled down to all of the other mechanics in the game, and how that also impacted what most people didn't see as problematic, which is team healing and altruistic heal speeds. So they basically said, okay, scrap that. We're not gonna bother. Yeah, scrap that. We're not gonna bother dealing with the 24 seconds for team heals. We'll go that way. We'll go back to 16. And medkits though, we'll keep nerfed. Those will have 24 charges, but have a debuff to efficiency and speed when used on yourself, while giving you a bonus to team healing. They kind of addressed exactly what everyone was saying, was keep team heals the same but make medkits worse. So if you want to jump in and give your thoughts, it seems like they actually did what was asked.
Yeah, so just to be clear for everybody, the medkits now all of them by default have 24 charges. Um, Altruistic heals, so when you're healing your teammates, are still going to be 16 like they are on live servers currently. Your self heals with medkits will have a 33% efficiency and time deficit. So basically, one medkit will heal yourself for full, which is great, but it will take longer, which is fine. But it won't have any negative impact on altruistic heals. One of the things that we were concerned about, and the community as a whole, was when altruistic speeds for heals were 24 seconds, effectively, you were adding half of a gen in terms of loss of efficiency, because the person getting healed for 24 seconds was there, and the person doing the altruistic healing was there for 24 seconds. That's 48 seconds. That's more than half of a gen. And they reverted that change, which is great. I mean, they did exactly what the community wanted, a fantastic middle ground between what it's on live servers now and what they initially had for the PTB. I think it's great.
Yeah, it really does address, like, it keeps the what was problematic, I think, in terms of balance with medkits. It scales that down without affecting people who are going without, and so it makes a lot less of a discrepancy between the people who decide to bring medkits and those who don't, which I think, like, evening the playing field is really important. Making games like less loadout dependent, I think, is really good. And it allows for more consistency. It decreases, like, the wide variables that can really sway matches, and I think, like, moving forward long term makes it a lot easier for them to try to balance the game just on a wide scale. It's just like, oh well, now we can see, like, even like the best build that you can run was with medkits, and that's now been, like, toned down a lot. So I think that it brings down in the average a little bit of how difficult, like, any given survivor squad might be to go against for killer, and that might give them a better understanding of where the balance is game wise for each individual killer versus survivor as a whole, and see where kill rates kind of fall. Like, I think it's a step in the right direction. There's, maps and add-ons, I think, for some of the higher tier killers too, that still need to be addressed moving forward. But if you can kind of close the gap on what the best build is versus what the bad, mediocre, random perk builds that you might want to just mess around with, I think it makes for a more consistent experience, and probably one that's, like, less frustrating for players to deal with, where you don't have those matches where you're just like, it felt like there was nothing I can do, right? That's, I think, the feeling you don't want to have.
And it addresses another thing that we talked about last week, where um, the experience with Sloppy Butcher or uh, Gift of Pain or these Mangled and Hemorrhage add-ons, uh, where that would drag out one of the more boring aspects of the game. It's with a lack of change to altruistic healing, it enables that it doesn't compound the issues of the healing slowdowns to the point where the game just feels like a drag. Going from having gens take forever due to gen slowdowns to just transitioning that to healing slowdowns, that's like the self heal from the med kit is what was problematic for killers in the first place, and they're uh, fixing like it is definitely an improvement for the killer experience, but it isn't hampering the like uh the play experience as a whole because you have these altruistic healing speeds retaining at the same rate.
Yeah, and I think that like talking about like Mango a little bit, right, with Sloppy or Gift of Pain add-ons that might apply, etc. Those those things impact medkits more, right? The percentages scale the speed that medkits heal more than it will for the 16-second base heal, just because of the increased charges. Plus, when you're talking about Sloppy and Gift of Pain, right, those apply hemorrhage also. So not only do you have even longer heal speeds, but medkits have a finite amount of charges. So it gives you a longer window if you're the killer to interrupt someone who's using a medkit and really just basically nullify the medkit's value for the duration of the match. It kind of it's interesting. Like I wonder how many times that has to happen to like survivors on the whole until maybe they kind of said like, oh, we anticipate that most people are still going to probably use medkits for self heals rather than using for the team heals, even though they're trying to push it and incentivize that direction. But I do think that there might be some sort of tipping point for some players where it feels too risky to put all of your eggs in one basket of like, this is how I used to be able to get myself healed, but now I'd rather
Mhm.
the consistency of just increase my heal speed on teammates, and then, especially if I'm injured and a teammate's injured, let's just get your heal over with so that way you can get to the next heal and we can wrap up 2 heals faster instead of trying to be as self-sufficient. Like it might actually make survivors forced to play like with better teamwork, which might improve the overall like average survivor experience in like solo queue or duo, right? If you're not like a full 4-man, it might just up people's like game understanding and game sense of like look for teammates, maybe run auras and stuff like that to kind of play around that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting point. So with this change, especially if you do still run medkits, uh, because the medkits themselves have been changed to increase the healing speed on those altruistic heals, in addition to just taking 16 seconds, uh, perks like bond or empathy or empathic connection, uh, things like prove thyself, things that reward you for working together on objectives, may have increased potency because of that.
Yeah, and I think they addressed some of the add-ons. I know that we were talking about it a little bit last week, where their add-on pass was like nullifying the great skill check bonus. They didn't really address whether they were going back on that change about heal speeds from what I saw in the notes, as far as how the bonuses for great skill checks affect like jumps in healing.
Yeah, so
Um,
it says here, like for the sponge, the new effect is increased great skill check zone. Or sorry, for butterfly tape. Nope, wrong one. I guess these are just yeah. I have the notes up on my other screen because they've done so many changes. It doesn't address the ones that we talked about last week for changing it from 3% to 2% or vice versa. So that
well,
might be staying the same from the PTB.
yeah, and there were some base kit changes too, where they were talking about just decreasing the amount that the great skill checks like jump your progress, in addition to like scaling back those add-ons, and they didn't specifically address that. They say they reverted to the 16 charges, but those changes might be staying in. Maybe we'll get some clarification, I assume, before it goes live on that. But The big add-on change, really, right? They got rid of the bonus blood point, um, like kind of ability on a couple of
And
the
I'm gonna miss
add-ons.
getting 375 blood points
Yeah,
for a great skill check with my sutures.
yeah, a huge loss there. But the big change really is just the rarity for the abdominal dressings. They reverted the number of charges back from 14 to 16 to stay more in
The
line.
gel dressings, to be clear.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I said the abdominal dressings. Yeah, just the gel dressings. Uh, changed back the charges, so now it's 16 charges, which is the amount it is to heal another teammate, but that won't give you a second full heal. You'd have to still stack that with another charge add-on in order to get two full heals. Stuff like Streetwise and Built to Last will allow you to get further value as well. But the change in rarity from being green to very rare, which is the iridescent, is a pretty big change in how frequently you're going to get them, right? Like especially now with the prestige system, you don't just sit at level 50 anymore. You keep going back to those early blood webs where those are a lot less common. So there's going to be people obviously who've been playing a long time who have those reserves built up, but as far as replenishing, yeah, as far as replenishing them, uh, maybe initially we won't feel the effects, but over time you should probably see a pretty decent scale back in how frequently people are able to run those add-ons. So I think that's a
I
good
mean,
thing.
running through blood webs now, I don't see, for instance, purple flashlights. I don't see very often at all. Honestly, I feel like I see syringes more than I see the purple flashlights. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Over the course of time, as people are exhausting their supply of the gel dressings, it may be, depending on how frequently the people play. And maybe a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, you'll see them a lot less because they're just going to be showing up less frequently on the blood webs.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that pretty much wraps up talking about the modification to heal and medkit stuff. The other big widely requested kind of reversion from the PTB that people were asking for was don't touch Hillbilly's add-ons, right? They were talking about messing with the two engravings add-ons in addition to some base kit changes to the overheat stuff to make it less often that you're overheating is staying, but they're not even going halfway. They're just saying, okay, you know what, we're actually just going to leave those two add-ons as is. Curvebilly survives, and there's not really that much to dive into pertaining to add-on changes, but I think just the wider message that from the medkits, and then also just this change of like, this is pretty different. This is a different behavior stance and like approach to modifying their game, listening to the community feedback. This isn't usually how they go about things, so it's a refreshing change.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it on a previous episode. Like the devs have been very clear in the past that the PTB is not used for testing. It's used for building hype for the release, for advertising, basically. And the the closest that I've ever come to quitting the game was the update 4.5.1, where they changed the HUD and they changed the survivor movement, and the community outcry was intense that this wasn't the way that people wanted it to be. And they made changes to the HUD eventually, and they changed the survivor movement not back to what it was before, but they changed it from what they were trying to change it to something that was more manageable. And it took a while, and they pushed it through how they had it, and it was very unpopular. And the changes themselves, but more so their lack of listening to the community, almost made me quit the game. And they've seemingly learned their lesson. Like they listened to people talking about Billy, they heard people talking about the altruistic heal speeds, and they said, "You know what? You guys are right. We're listening to the community. We're going to go back on those." And that's phenomenal. I'm incredibly happy that they did that.
Yeah, and I think that it it went from a patch that had a lot of good stuff in it, right? It has the blood web changes to make those more efficient. They touched a bunch of the gen regression perks like Call of Brine and Overcharge and Pain Res, which we'll get to in a second. But they tried to scale back Dead Hard, right? They tried to balance it for both sides, and there's a lot of stuff that I think was pretty universally praised from both sides, even if maybe some slight disagreements in how they might have gone about it. But there wasn't anything that jumped out other than really the heel speeds and Billy. And they were like, okay, we'll fix those, we'll address those the way that you guys want them, and we'll keep the other good stuff while also even tweaking them further to try to enhance some of those changes that we were trying to accomplish, and hopefully coming out with what I think is actually a better finished product than what they had on the PTB in some cases. And it's like, this patch is shaping up, bugs and launch aside, I guess, of what we see
Yeah,
on
we'll
launch
see.
day. But on paper, this patch looks really, really good. And I think it just feels even better, like you said, like just to know that as a community that we're being received. This is like one of, if not the first time, it feels like we're actually having our thoughts taken into account on changes that they're trying to make, rather than them just kind of shoving it down our throats and we just kind of adapt and deal with it. So
Yeah, I think it's phenomenal. And we we as in the two of us, but also like the community as a whole, have been very critical of behavior, and justifiably so. When a company screws up, they should know it, but like they need to know when they do stuff right. And it seems like the community as a whole is understanding how good these changes are and are giving behavior the proper credit for it. But yeah, I mean, it's great, and I want them to know that it's great. I'm very happy that these changes are going out the way that they are, but more importantly, that we're not having a repeat of 4.5.1 where they just don't listen to us. I think that's the most important part for me.
yeah, definitely. Even like, yeah, going past even like the specific changes, I think that like wider message makes me feel more optimistic about like the roadmap and the future direction of the game for sure.
Yeah.
And then I guess kind of going into some of the other specifics, we'll talk about a few of the perks that got changed a little bit more. Dead Hard being the first one. So on the PTB, Dead Hard got changed to have a finite number of uses, and you had to earn it. Right? It started initially was you needed to get an unhook. You need to get a safe unhook to charge your Dead Hard, and then upon a successful Dead Hard, it would deactivate until you got another successful unhook. You couldn't store it like with tokens or anything, but it allowed you to get maximum, in theory, of 6 uses, probably far less than that. But instead of the unlimited use contingent on exhaustion, which is how it works now on live, now there were some concerns, right? Of we were talking about people farming their teammates that try to just earn it. And there was also some concerns about, well, if you're getting tunneled and you don't have any opportunities to go for unhooks, you're not going to get a chance to use it. So they kind of lowered that cap even further of maximum of 2 Dead Hards. You get a Dead Hard every time that you get unhooked, it will activate until you use it. So a little bit more consistency. I don't think that on average it's going to result in any like significant difference in the number of Dead Hard uses that you were getting between the two versions. This probably just gives it a little bit more consistency and disincentivizes the toxic potential farming of teammates that I think could have steered the community to go, especially in solo queue matches. So kind of like a sideways change. I guess, what are your thoughts on it? It seems okay to me.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the sentiment that it makes it more consistent. Like your ceiling is a lot lower from 6 to 2. Your floor is the same at 0. If you get 0 safe unhooks, or if you never get hooked, then you don't ever get a Dead Hard. But honestly, if you never get hooked, you don't really need a Dead Hard. But you're getting it much more consistently. Now, I've been running Deliverance quite a bit lately on my Survivor build, and the way that it initially worked on the PTB, where it was based off of your safe unhooks, synergized well with Deliverance because you would charge your Dead Hard and your Deliverance at the same time. However, the fact that you still get your Dead Hard when you unhook yourself still works with the Deliverance just after the fact. The only thing that I'm very happy with this change, don't get me wrong. The only thing that's a little bit of a bummer is when you play with a team, when you're stacked up, you could coordinate, and we've done that when I'm running Deliverance. Let me go for the save so I can proc my Deliverance. We could have done the same thing of let me go proc my Dead Hard and my Deliverance. But I mean, this is such a more consistent way of getting your Dead Hard. I'm still not going to run Dead Hard because it's not called Balanced Landing, but it's a way of doing it. And I had another point. In the patch notes, they mentioned that how Dead Hard worked on the PTB incentivized tunneling because now the killer knows that if the person who did the unhook had Dead Hard, they now got it again. So it would incentivize the killer to go after the person that was on hook initially. And this does address that. It doesn't address it perfectly because if the killer hits through the unhook endurance or through off the record, then you're presumably still not going to be able to dead hard because you're in deep wound. So you would have to wait and mend and then do it later on. But I mean, overall, this is a very positive change. Neither way that dead hard activated would prevent somebody from tunneling if they wanted to, but this gives a much more consistent and disincentivizes the direct tunneling. If it's in the middle, they're less likely to tunnel than they would have
Right.
before.
It's like you could go a whole match without, you could risk or a lot less of a chance of going against and running into dead hard. But if you tunnel, your chances go up a lot. That if they have it, they're going to have it charge,
Right.
for sure.
Exactly.
So it definitely disincentivizes it. And we know that there's been plenty of complaints about dead hard. So hopefully that does disincentivize tunneling. That would be pretty nice. So they actually kind of basically slightly buffed two of the change perks, one for each side. In addition to Dead Hard, right? If we call Dead Hard kind of a middle ground,
Side
sideways
shift.
sort of change. Pain res for killers was changed in the initial version to only have 4 uses, once for each time that you hook a unique survivor for the first time, similar to old barbecue and chili, or how you would have to get your tokens stacked up for No Way Out, right? We have to get each survivor hooked once. Pain res works the same way. Scourge hooks, same thing. People were concerned that it might not give you enough value because of the finite uses, and now instead of adjusting how much you can use it, they've just upped the base regression from 15 to 25%, which is a really big jump. Obviously, quick math adds up to 100% of a generator. That's 90 seconds worth of regression in 4 hooks that you could get, which is a really massive slowdown. I guess if you want to jump in, what are your thoughts on pain res? It's a pretty big change, but it seems a lot better than what they were giving us initially.
So we're actually going to be talking about pain res a little bit later. So I'll save some of my thoughts for that. But I mean, you're essentially getting 4 charges of pop goes the weasel, where you don't have to go out of your way to go to a gen and to do the kick animation and then to go back to wherever the action is. It is more limited than it is on live servers now, but the up in regression that you get is well worth it, I think. You are still limited in some ways because of the scourge hooks and like the placement of those, but I think this is great. I initially, when the PTB notes came out, was thinking about possibly changing my build for Demogorgon, but with this increase in regression, I am going to keep my build the way that it is.
Yeah, and
I think it's good.
Yeah, and I think like you said, the maximum potential in terms of how much regression you get from the perk per match is lower, but I think there's like a few really nice things. Like the obvious one is that you just get more regression up front, right? Like earlier in matches, is really, really nice. The fact that you can just get a couple of hooks and get to that base, like 4 hooks getting to that 100%, you needed, I mean, 6 doesn't get you there on live servers now. So it's pretty nice that you scale that a lot faster. And I think the bigger individual chunks off of generators gives you a longer time, especially if you're dealing with a generator that's being worked on cooperatively. a larger window for you to go and interrupt that gen too. If two people are working on it 15%, they're going to finish that in less than 10 seconds before you can get over there. Increasing that does give you, like, so many gens come down to that split second where generators 95%, 96, just barely out of reach. That gives more time to interrupt. I think that there's a pretty big gain in that regard for the perk. And then also, I feel like there could be some manipulation of how you spread out your hooks, right? Where if you want to save some of your pain res for later in the game, where maybe you've 3 or 4 gen, because you get like 3 of the hooks and you keep 1 for later. I don't know
Damn,
exactly.
you took one of the topics I was going to talk about.
But it's interesting, I guess, in how you like spread it out. I don't know how consistent that is, because then it's like you have to like intentionally ignore people and like give up pressure. So
Not necessarily. You can hook them on non-scourge hooks.
oh, that's true. I get is that how, I guess I don't know is that how it would work, where it doesn't use the charge? Is it just
That has to be how it works. Yeah.
the first time you just hook them on a scourge hook specifically?
Yeah.
I guess. Okay.
Oh, I thought about this.
So I guess, yeah, I mean, I think there's ways to make that work and use, like, it definitely incentivize a little more creativity. Didn't mean to steal your thunder. I didn't realize that's where you're necessarily going with it. But
I got more to talk about. Don't worry.
But yeah, it's a cool change, and I think it addresses the concerns of it being super meta. I don't think every killer is necessarily going to run this perk, right? A lot of the killers that require setup and stuff, I think, like Trapper and Hag, I think, are the classic examples. Probably don't go for as widespread pressure, but anyone who's really strong in chase, any of those upper tier killers, I think, benefit immensely in getting that early game slowdown.
I actually was thinking about that this might be better for lower tier killers. Something like Myers, where you can get more benefit for having less mobility, because something like Pop, for example, you can get more percent regression, but you have to have the mobility to get to the gen that you want to pop in the first place. And I actually think that having lower mobility killers where you just need to get to a scourge hook to get your full regression actually benefits them quite a bit.
Yeah, I could see that, where like maybe those killers who are getting less hooks, they don't need as many. You basically just need 2 hooks to get half a gen, and those killers might be struggling to get hooks early on. So it could get them to that value a little bit faster without needing as widespread pressure as you might have previously.
Yeah, I will say Trapper and Hag in particular, excuse me, are good examples that probably don't get as much benefit as somebody like, again, the first thought that came to my mind is Myers for some reason, but like Myers and Pig and Wraith, maybe, like those killers. I guess Wraith has some mobility, but the ones that aren't focused on mobility, the nurses and the blights and the spirits and those, where movement isn't their primary ability, I think that they can get extra value from pain res, where as opposed to certain other forms of regression.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think, and the survivor counterpart that got buffed from the PTB was Circle of Healing, was the boon. So on the PTB, they stripped the ability to self heal within the boon without a med kit. You now always need a teammate or a med kit in order to self heal, or to get yourself healed, I guess. And they were keeping the 50% heal speed bonus while also giving it a new ability of revealing your aura if you were injured and inside the boon's range. Now they've doubled the heal speed. They were kind of talking about how 50% basically saved you like 5 seconds on a heal. Then that's not even accounting for having to spend time running to the boon's range, setting it up, finding a teammate. So they pretty much really needed to address the speed back to a level where you only need maybe 2 or 3 heals to sort of break even in terms of efficiency. But if a boon is left unchecked, now this boon can start getting you a decent amount of value. And that's not even, getting into synergies with other boons, and now the change to Overzealous. So it seems like a nice change. I don't know if you wanted to add on, but
yeah, I think that the increase to 100% is very strong. I I don't think that it's like broken by any means, but last week we were talking about how the changes to Skull Merchant and the changes to uh, Overcharge and Call of Brine, how it was kind of disincentivizing this 3-gen playstyle that we've been seeing so much of lately. And if you set up a boon, a Circle of Healing boon across the map from where your 3-gen is, you just have that much less time that you're having to spend on healing, where you can run back then and pressure the generators. Now, like you mentioned, and just to be clear, these only or the boon Circle of Healing only affects altruistic healing speeds. But like, if we've been in situations plenty of times where one of us is dead on hook and they're playing a 3-gen style. And so the person who's dead on hook will stay across the map and just act as triage to heal the people when they get hit trying to pressure the generators in the 3-gen. Now you're able to get, seconds faster, seconds faster, seconds faster. That just compounds over time and gives you a lot of value in addition to the aura reading. So I think this is a great change. It's not overpowered by any means, but I don't think that I think it would take a lot for altruistic healing speeds to be broken, because it's just, you have to go to the other person, you have to get healed by the other person, then you have to go back into whatever action you're trying to do. Uh, so I think that this is a fair change, one that will certainly increase the usage of Circle of Healing as compared to what the PTB initially was. I think this is great.
Yeah, right. It's kind of, if you're comparing it to another heal perk, the obvious one that jumps out is Will Make It, which is where you have to unhook somebody to get 100% healing for a limited amount of time. This kind of has a similar restriction where it requires setup. It requires to set up a boon instead of requiring an unhook. And there's a time limit where it's kind of undetermined depending on how long it takes, if ever, for the killer to snuff the boon totem, as opposed to a more defined time limit with Will Make It. Obviously the boon also grants that buff to your teammates. I really like the combination of moving to a team style perk where it only rewards you doing team heals, while also providing the information of showing people's auras when they're injured inside the boon. Like, I think that really helps for like solo queue and lack of communications teams, which is what needs the most help for Survivor side for sure. And that's a really nice quality of life thing, time, and especially like timing wise with the change. I'm glad that they're doing both at the same time, so it doesn't feel like as useless of a perk in solo queue. I think that information should really help it stay relevant despite not running in like a full Survivor Friends or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the aura reading, last week you proposed the idea of making that base for all boon perks, and I was kind of questioning if that might push out bond and empathy and empathic connections and whatnot. But for solo queue, being able to see the auras when in the space specifically to get altruistic heals is such a huge quality of life change that's so beneficial. And especially with the HUD, where you can see, okay, so this person is in the range of the boon, wanting a heal. This person is being chased by the killer. So there's two other people. I see that the third person is on a gen, so I'm gonna go and heal that person. That, because you have the HUD to see that that other person is still working on a gen, I think, and the other person is being chased. I think that that's a great change, so that you can kind of be a little more efficient with your time in solo queue.
Yeah, and I think it makes you make a little bit more of an informed decision on whether you go to a boon to heal the teammate. And I think also, like, it just kind of crossed my mind, it's I was talking, I know, previous episode about making that a universal thing for boons, of all of the boons show auras of teammates within the range. But with this only pertaining to Circle of Healing, it allows the teammates to know even before they go into the boon to know that it has Circle of Healing applied, right? Like there's plenty of times where you can go into a boon and it doesn't have Circle of Healing as one of the effects, so you can actually know without having gone and stepped inside of it yourself that it has Circle if you see like a teammate's like an injured teammate's aura inside of it, like without having to
If they're
go.
already injured, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like
Yeah.
it could give you that information of what that of at least what one of the boons
Right.
are attached to that totem before even having to go and check it out, even if
It's
you're
true.
cross map, which is
Yeah.
an interesting thing that I hadn't thought of previously. So and then kind of the last part of the patch notes here is an adjustment to that one auto haven tile. If you've played the game enough and are familiar, it was a newer style of tile that came around a few months ago. It has a palette and a window, which sounds really great in theory, but the palette part of the loop is like it's laughably small, and the window is probably even more so, and they aren't really closely linked, so that way you can loop them together. The killer can basically always respect the pallet, or they cannot. They can get stunned by the pallet, and they just easily walk around and get the hit before you get any sort of distance. They've changed that tile now, so they leaked a little bit of a picture from a zoomed out kind of aerial view, so you have like it kind of, we were talking about a little bit before, it seems like a half 4 lanes 4 wall sort of tile, but it looks playable and loopable, which is anything is better than what they had, so we'll take it.
Yeah, so on your screen right now, you'll see the image of the tile that we're talking about. On the left, you can see the top bit of the palette poking over the TV. That's where that is. And you're right. This does look like 3 of the 4 lanes of a 4 wall is kind of cut in half, and then the last one is a full one. But in exchange for those 3 halves cut off, you have basically a short wall jungle gym plastered at the end. Uh, and I'm not convinced that this is like a great tile, but it's absolutely better than what it was before. The the fact that those first 2 lanes where the palette is attached to is pretty much the same as a 4 walls for the most part, means that you can actually play it and you can mind game it, and you can uh, you know you can link it into the window. Like it's much better than what we have on live servers now.
Yeah, it seems like it will be a tile that is like useful for like you can outplay your opponent in meaningful ways and stall. It doesn't seem like one of those tiles where, as the from the killer's perspective, that you have to like give up on the survivor because, oh, this tile is way too strong, it's going to waste too much time if they know what they're doing. It doesn't seem like it's too far in that direction if you're thinking like, long wall jungle gym or something more in that vein. um so it seems like a nice middle ground, especially that like at least you can use it as a resource, whereas previously it was a fact they might as well have not had anything there might as well have just been trees or something.
Yeah.
It was pretty useless. So this is a not even something that was really asked for widely because it wasn't kind of included in the umbrella of the PTB, but it's really nice that they were proactive about it and decided to address it, which
Yeah,
is really
for sure.
nice.
Mhm.
um so kind of transitioning from our what has so far been this podcast of only talking about the updates from behavior, we are gonna kind of talk about some a build from each of us that we've been running and kind of talk about the perks and what goes into our thought process, and how everything kind of synergizes. If you want to take it away, Scrap, I know you were talking about Demogorgon.
Yeah, so this is a feature that I've been really excited for since Settle and I first bounced around the idea of doing a podcast. So, one thing that we want to do is every now and then, when the entirety of our show is not dominated by updates,
When they let us catch our
is
breath, yeah.
yeah, is to go over deep dives of individual perks or groups of perks for builds, and talk about like why we run them, some maybe like hidden synergies that people might not know, and just talk about things that we like to run ourselves. So the first one that I'm going to do is my build for Demogorgon. So My build for Demogorgon is Corrupt Intervention. I run Save the Best for Last, Fearmonger, and my last perk is Pain Resonance. So the idea here is that I control space with my Demogorgon portal powers and hold on to the gen pressure by getting the hooks and being chase focused with Save the Best for Last.
So what is your, I guess, like particular, like what's your thought process of going into deciding on Corrupt Intervention? Obviously that perk has changed over the years, so why still Corrupt Intervention? What makes it kind of mesh with the build?
Yeah, so if people aren't aware, Corrupt Intervention blocks the 3 furthest gens from where the killer starts, and when the killer gets it down, the entity blockers go away. That used to not be the case. It used to always last for 2 minutes, regardless of anything else. And now it will last either for 2 minutes or when you get it down. So a lot of people stopped running Corrupt when that change went through, but I still think that it's very strong with Demogorgon. I very rarely get the full 2 minutes of value out of it, but it does 2 important things. It lets me set up my portals in advance, and it draws the survivors in so that I can get that initial down. There are other things that I've considered, like lethal. However, that doesn't allow me that setup time. And I think that that's really important for the playstyle that I've been adopting for the past several months.
Yeah, I guess lethal kind of forces you, if you want to get use out of the perk, you like have to go for chase every time to get value. And I guess you were talking about it a little bit. What's setting up portals? Can you talk a little bit more about like what your method is about using portals and stuff with his power?
Yeah, so I've found really good success on portaling up by the generators. And then when I get downs or when I have a lull in my chases, I can hold my shred, get the killer instinct on if anybody is nearby my portals, and if the situation calls for it, I can teleport back. Now, one method that I do for my setup that I think is important is the order that you place the portals down. So what I'll generally do is at the start of the match, I will go there's 4 generators that will be unblocked, and I prioritize placing portals on those 4. So like let's say that I have these 4 generators and I start here. I will generally go toward a more centralized generator, place a portal there, and then go back to one that's kind of out of the way, so that when I portal back to activate it, I will be closer to my next set of generators to portal next to. If I set further away and then move to the inside and then portal back, now I have a further distance to go to get my next one set up. And I like to be more centralized because not only do I have a shorter distance after the first one, but if there are survivors there, then I can take a chase if I decide that that's what I want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. It keeps you, I think just being more central map in general lets you have a little bit more options.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
guess I know I stole your thunder a tiny bit, but I'll bounce it back. And if you want to add on regarding the change to pain res, what are your thoughts on how this change kind of affects your build? I know you were saying at one point you were, with the initial PTB, you were considering just removing that from your build entirely. So
Yeah, so one great synergy with this build is between Fearmonger and Pain Resonance. So when a survivor is on a generator, they're blinded. And I guess this was more relevant prior to the Pain Res change, but it's still nice to get some extra value out of it. If the survivor is blinded, then they can't see the aura when I'm hooking them, and that would cause them to let go of the generator and scream. Uh, and that combination is very nice together. You have the added benefit of if you you know get a survivor off of the generator, you don't have to worry about sprint burst or lithe or dead hard stuff like that. That's a very good benefit from Fearmonger as well. But it was nice to get that extra little value off of having them be blinded as well. When the pain res change for the PTB first was announced, I was thinking, well, I might get rid of pain res, which made me less likely to want to run Fearmonger because you would lose out on a little bit of that interaction. So I was thinking, maybe I go Deadlock and something else. I hadn't really decided, but with this change, the upping of the percent, I'm very confident that I want to keep this. And something that you mentioned was possibly delaying hooking on Scourge hooks to get more value from the pain res hooks. And that's absolutely something that I had considered. One thing that Save the Best for Last in particular kind of allows you the flexibility to do is focus, not tunneling, but like if you want to focus on non-obsessions, you can get better value for your Save the Best for Last for that. So I could use up the tokens on non-obsessions if I wanted. You can, of course, always use your shred in order to maintain your stacks, but you have the flexibility to focus on more survivor or more individual survivors that aren't the obsession and get the pain resonance hooks from that. And you can delay your obsession, or if you've already hooked your obsession, again, you have a lot of flexibility, but you could hook on non-Scourge hooks once you know or have good intuition that a generator is at least at 25% so that you can get full value off of that.
Yeah, and I think with keeping Fearmonger, it's probably going to get more value now that there's the Dead Hard change going through as well. Like you're probably gonna see an uptick in stuff like Sprint Burst in particular. So that probably just gels pretty nicely with the patch rather than even any sort of beyond the synergy to just the build. So that's pretty good timing to keep it equipped.
And with the change to Circle of Healing, where people are going to be, seeing auras of injured survivors, if they're on a generator, they may not know that the injured survivor is in Circle of Healing waiting to get a heal if they're, not in a voice call together.
Right, and it might be one of those things where if the person's just standing in Circle of Healing waiting for someone to show up and they're like, oh, no one even knows I'm here. So that's an interesting thing. Like these two changes could actually like benefit the perk a lot. You could see a lot more value from it. And then I guess aside from just the build, any sort of tips on Shred and using his chase power?
Yeah, so I think it's like fairly common knowledge that as a Demogorgon player, if you go from a height like on top of a hill or like on the second floor of Ormond, something like that, you're able to use your shred to get distance. There are some places where that doesn't hold true, notably like Garden of Joy. If you try and shred from the top, there's for some reason an invisible wall there, and you just fall straight down. But you can go on top of a hill generally and get a lot of distance. In certain situations, you can actually shred on top of a hill through a window. I've done that a few times. So that can be a good use of your power to get distance. On cars, so like on Auto Haven or at the car loop on Garden of Joy, in the front of Gas Haven, stuff like that, you can use your shred on a car and you'll slide off. You won't clank with it, and you can glide. You can kind of mirror the movement of your survivor to slide off and get a hit at the end of the car loop. Similar to Huntress Hatchets, if you're running against a wall, you can aim a little bit away from the wall to cover if they hug the wall or if they try and juke out. And honestly, I've said it a lot. Survivors think that Shack in particular is a lot safer against demo than it actually is, and it's for that same reason as with Huntress, where you can cover both hugging the wall and the juke out by aiming just a little bit out away from the wall. And with demo, you're still 115, so you're not really losing much distance by doing that. And then the last thing, and this is relevant, like in particular on Ormond, where you have we call it a Zamboni, but it's absolutely not
it's
a Zamboni.
Definitely not a Zamboni.
Yeah, whatever that thing is,
that
off to
big
the side.
thing on Ormond. Yeah.
There's a chest that spawns in the front of it, and a lot of people don't know that Demo slides off of chests. He does not clank with chests in any regard. So you can use that to loop tightly, and as you're coming around to the front of that not Zamboni, you can charge your shred, turn immediately, flick to the chest, and glide off of it to get a hit that way, and really surprise the survivor. And of course, there's the obvious thing of if you're running Save the Best for Last, you can use your shred to hit your obsession. Everybody knows about that, but
Yeah,
just in
yeah,
case.
circumvent the losing stacks sort of
Yeah.
thing whenever you want.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and I guess. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. For add-ons, if you're running this style, I like Barb's classes and Blackheart to reduce your shred on pallets and on successful hits. Other ones that I've been using, as I really like those add-ons, I have used up a lot of them. So like Barb's classes in particular, I don't have a huge reserve of. So I've been experimenting with other ones. Ones that can prolong the amount of time that it takes for your survivors to cleanse your totems or increasing the detection range. That can help you when you're trying to defend your generators, when you're holding your shred. On those downtimes, you can make it back to your portals to defend your generators, chase the survivors off of it. Sometimes, if you're doing that kind of style, you may want to set up multiple portals near a particular generator, one active and one non-active. That way, if they cleanse it, you can have a backup to get back to it. That's more as the game is progressing toward the end. I've had games where that's important. There are add-ons that would be very strong that don't work as well for this build. So, in particular, the Lypros Lycan and the whistle, the Lifeguard whistle is fine for this. Lifeguard whistle is the one where you see the killer instinct even when you're not holding your shred. That's fine, but I think having the extra range or the longer seal time is better. Having your shred be reduced, I think, is better. Lypros Lycan in particular is great, but I want to run Lethal Pursuer if I run that. And this isn't the build for that, like we discussed before with Corrupt.
Nice. Yeah, I think that all like works pretty well, and that makes sense with like despite the Lifers like being like super strong without like the added lethal benefit, it doesn't really like fit what the build is trying to do, and that gives you like info, whereas you're using other tools and perks and stuff to get that info, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I guess transitioning to my build is survivor focused. Is my the main two perks that kind of fit into it are Metal of Man and Object of Obsession. This is a combo that I've seen very rarely that people use, but it's something that I've enjoyed running. It kind of lets you sort of bodyguard for teammates, where you're taking additional hits. The object kind of lets you see where the killer is, so you kind of know, even if you're not in chase, where the action is, so you can kind of get in there. And you also have inner healing, which lets you break the totem and then kind of store a heal. You jump in a locker at some point and heal up. And then Dead Hard as well, to kind of let you get some additional protection hits to fuel metal, since those count as well. So
yeah, so like when you're running this build, Metal of Man requires you to get 3 protection hits. What are your kind of go-to ways of even getting those protection hits in the first place?
Yeah, so the easy one to try and get is whenever they're already carrying a survivor to a hook, you kind of just jump in front. Usually if you're going to do that, I think it's actually better to run up to the killer, like kind of while they're picking up, let them hit you, and that gives you as much time as possible to get away from them while they're carrying the survivor the rest of the way. You don't want to take the hit under the hook, since they just hook and then all of a sudden you're just right in chase. Gives you more time to get away and potentially heal, especially you have like inner healing already kind of charged up, which is really nice.
And I will say also, if you're in a situation where that gives you your third one, that gives you your third protection hit so that your metal is active, that gives you time to actually gain your collision back, so that you may be able to take a hit in order for the survivor to wiggle out at the hook.
Yeah, especially if you with dead hard even too gives you a chance to dead hard a
True.
second hit as well. Um, and then on top of that, like you have kind of it kind of depends on the killer, right? Like you can actually body block some killer powers, and even if you're not losing health state, it still gives you credit. So for example, with Legion, if you're one of the early survivors who's hit by their feral frenzy, even if you're already in deep rune, right, where they hit you a second time, that cancels their power. It doesn't down you or anything, but if you can kind of stay in the fray and force them to hit you, not only do you get the benefit of it canceling your power, but if someone's already injured nearby, you get the benefit of getting a second protection hit without costing you anything, which is really, really nice. You also get protection hits from jumping in front of injured survivors who are, while Pinhead is using his chain, which is really nice, which is a really, and that doesn't, outside of if they're running the engineer's fang, you're not going to be losing a health state there. So it gives you a chance to get away without costing you anything. So there's some like unique killer. I know you can, if you're with a teammate, you can jump into a trapper's trap while an injured teammate's nearby,
Yeah.
and it's just like, good job. You checked with your feet for your teammate. That was really nice of you. And it rewards you with a stack, and they can just get you out of the trap really easily. That's a little bit easier to pull off if you're in comms and your teammate knows what's up. But yeah, there's some unique ways to get it for sure.
So you mentioned inner healing. Why is that your method of healing yourself as opposed to, self-care or, a med kit or something like that?
Yeah, there's definitely ways that you could do it with other perks. I think there was more of an option to run Circle of Healing. It didn't heal you as fast, but it gave you more uses out of one use of the totem. But now with the change to team only, it doesn't make you as self-sufficient, which I think is really important for this build to work. So having it also kind of gives you time to when you're not in chase, like you can kind of set up early in a match, which is more of a killer thing. But the survivor, you kind of get the chance to just get a totem ready, and then you can go take a hit, get out, and then immediately heal really, really quickly, much faster than even a team heal or a base med kit. Especially now with the med kit changes, I think inner healing is like clearly the best way to get that health state back really, really quickly. And if your teammate is good at looping, right, you can jump in, take a hit, and if they continue to go for them, you can kind of peel off, jump in a locker, and then just jump right back in and take another hit right away. If you mix in a dead hard in either of those chases, there's your 3 stacks right there. So it's a really quick way to get those stacks generated.
Do you think that the change to circle is gonna influence you running uh, inner at all? Because people circle is getting nerfed from what it is on live, but it's gonna have different utility. Do you think that that may have any kind of impact on you choosing inner as opposed to some other form of healing?
I don't think so. I think the previous version of Circle is probably the only thing that I was like really considering outside of like medkits. If I was just thinking of perks, I think those are really the two. And I think now that that doesn't have the self heal aspect to it, I feel like it even sways it further in the direction of like inner healing being your choice there.
Gotcha. Do you want to go over the kind of hilarious interaction of Medal of Man with Object of Obsession?
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons, right? So being the obsession is really key for object to get its passive, which is that you see the killer, your aura is revealed to the killer every 30 seconds, and object's normal effect is that whenever the killer reveals your aura, you see the killer back. So moments like lethal at the beginning of matches, if the killer sees you, you can see them back, which is really nice. Outside of a couple of stealth killers, you can just tell exactly who the killer is and exactly where they are. It also Object also kind of increases, well, both metal and object increase your chance of being the obsession. And this is a really sneaky way to be the obsession and take a bunch of hits and drain all of the stacks from Save the Best for Last. It's a really good counter. It's probably, I mean, Save is number 1 or 2 in terms of, I think, the frequency of chase perks, maybe with like Bamboozle up there in terms of what I think you see most often. And kind of nullifying that perk while also fueling your own is a really, really nice combination. But then you have the really bizarre interaction of what happens when you've used your metal stack, but you haven't gone down yet, right? You have to reset the counter on Metal of Man. You have to be completely downed, so you have to eat the hit, and then you have to eat another hit and get down to for it to reset. But if you use your metal hit and you're ever healed back to full, while you're full healed, the killer sees your aura outside of, I think it's like 16 meters. It's a really short range, but because of object, you see the killer back. So whenever you're full healed, you're just having this stare off of seeing each other at all times until they down you, which is it's a very, very powerful tool. Like having precise info on where the killer is super nice. And I think the killer kind of knows how a lot of the time, like how powerful that is. So it kind of makes you the priority. So it kind of creates a really big distraction where it's like they have to knock this ability off of you in order to kind of regain control of that information. It's a nice little synergy, and it's ridiculous sometimes just having a constant aura of the killer on your screen. But
And I mean, that's such a niche interaction that, I've been playing with you when this has happened, and I don't feel like a whole lot of killers understand what's going on. You were talking
yeah,
about that they need to identify that they need to knock this interaction off, but I don't know that many killers know what's happening in the first place.
yeah, that's probably true. There's probably a good amount of the time where they're just confused, but yeah, it's a really interesting. I don't think there's anything quite like it when that's going on. Like there's really nothing comparable
Just
other than
permanent
maybe
blood amber.
yeah, it's like permanent blood amber, and it's like yeah, it's nice that the killer can see you, but like unless it's a nurse, I don't even know what you fear exactly. Like it just lets you constantly have really good positioning against whatever killer you're going against, whether it's range or even just like holding W away. You're never gonna be confused on exactly what direction they're coming from. So it's pretty nice.
And especially if you're in comms where you can call out, you know, hey, the killer's over here. Hey, the killer is moonwalking.
Hmm.
You can give call outs to your teammates who are in chase with the killer.
Yeah,
That's very powerful.
yeah, it definitely even improves in value in comms for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a fun build, and I'm glad that the fact that the base healing speeds are remaining the same should give it continued value. I was a little concerned on how long it was taking to heal on the initial PTB, but this build should hopefully remain intact. The frequency of the dead hards might make it a little bit harder, but coming off of Unhook. Oh, and I guess one other thing I'll add on is looking for opportunities to use your unhook endurance to take free hits beyond even just dead hard is a really, really important way to gain free stacks. um Also, if you are trying to get your dead hard charged, going for a trade at a hook, right, where you get hit, then you unhook the survivor, and then the killer immediately hits you down, that second hit of them downing you because you unhooked the survivor and they're injured is a stack. And then you get put on the hook and you get your dead hard charged as well now. So I think trading for hooks is a really good thing to do, especially that a lot of the times they're going to spend 2 M1s or something on you, and if they're running save, that's a free 4 stacks removed as well.
Yeah. That's
But
cool. It's a very fun build to run, and if you are in a like, even if you just have one buddy with you, you were mentioning taking the unhook endurance hit. If a teammate's able to put BT on you, that gives you even more window to get into the fray.
yeah, and it's a really nice, like I said, obviously the counter to save is nice, but just being an anti-tunnel reward, we've had it a couple of times. Usually it's not this extreme, but I'm full healed behind an injured teammate that's getting chased. Take a hit, take a dead hard hit, take the down. That's 3 stacks right there, and you come off of the next hook with metal. It's and it doesn't even it prioritizes any sort of endurance. So if you get unhooked and they hit you through your unhook endurance, even if you didn't use your dead hard, you can be in deep wound and still get your value from metal. So it kind of gives you a a more consistent and longer lasting off the record in a way where you don't have to worry about that instant hit off of unhook kind of countering off the record. I think that's the big concern with
Yeah.
that perk. Metal, if you have it ready to go before you even get hooked, it kind of just lets you not. It's crazy how powerful you can feel when you know you're actually invincible and you can run into a dead zone on a generator and pressure, and you're just like, okay, well, if they show up, I get a free escape every time.
Yeah, you have to earn it, but you don't have to worry about doing conspicuous actions. You don't have to worry about the timer running out. You don't have to worry about, you know, being in deep wound for some other reason. It's a very, very powerful effect if you can get
yeah,
it.
yeah, definitely. But that pretty much wraps up our episode. I hope we get more opportunities to talk about different builds. We certainly have plenty of ideas and obviously other topics related to the game, related to stuff kind of outside the game. But we will see if behavior keeps churning out the updates at the pace they've been going. But
Hey,
it's been
if we get more updates like this where, they're net positive changes and they're listening to the community feedback, I'll take doing update videos every week. But yeah, when we can sneak in extra stuff like this, it's nice. It's fun.
yeah, definitely. But we'll catch you all again next week and appreciate you guys tuning in. If you want to, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. We've got all of our socials and stuff in the description. You can follow us on Twitch, on Twitter. Appreciate everyone coming by. See you next week.
Peace.